Good morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight. Welcome to this online worship service. For those of you who like to use the chat box during the service, which you're welcome to do, and people are doing right now, saying hello, just be sure when you post there that you've used that little blue drop-down menu to select panelists and attendees. If you only post to panelists, your message only comes to me, and I probably won't see it during the service. And we want to have a conversation amongst all of us. So this is me standing at the door of our little chapel, greeting you. Since I can't hug you myself, let's all give ourselves a big hug of hello and welcome. We may be needing to give ourselves lots of hugs these days. I want to especially welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice. In addition to this online worship, I want you to know that many of our groups and activities are continuing to happen online as well. Activities like our women's book club, men's breakfast group, support groups, religious education for children, all these and more are happening online. You don't have to be a member to participate in our groups and activities. They're open to everyone. So if you're new to Chalice and would like to learn more, you're invited to stay in this Zoom room after the service ends for our newcomer chat, and we use the chat box for that. Yeah. So let's take a breath together. We begin our service by acknowledging that wherever each of us is watching, if we are in what is now called the United States, then we are on land that has been stolen from indigenous peoples. Our congregational home in what is now called Escondido is on land that is part of the traditional territories of the 12 bands of the Kumeyaay Nation and the 7 bands of the Payam-Kacham, also called Luiseño. Land that is sacred to us now was stolen from people for whom that land is also sacred. So as we continue our work as a community of shared faith, may we strive to build relationships, right relationships with Kumeyaay and Payam-Kacham peoples, and we find our way to right relationship with our local tribes. Now we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The flaming chalice was first used during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee as a symbol of life-saving refuge for people fleeing persecution in Europe. May our chalice flame burn brightly, that all who are seeking may find us. The words of our call to worship. At the end of one week, the beginning of the next, come into this space with your open heart, your broken heart, your whole heart. Come in and set aside who you think you should be in favor of who you are. Let this be the community where you bring who you are, your whole self, your broken self, your open self. Lay down your burden here. Drink from the well here. Rest your weary soul here. Among we kindred spirits, fellow travelers, we who are also open and broken and whole. At the end of one week, the beginning of the next, come, let us worship together. Inspired by the Christian observance of Advent, we approach the winter holidays by lighting candles in the 4 weeks before Christmas. The tradition of Advent candles reaches back to pre-Christian Northern Europeans. During the darkest days of winter, they lit as many as 24 candles on an evergreen-covered wheel or wreath. By lighting a candle a day, they marked time, anticipating the return of the sun's light and warmth. Now we light candles to remind us of the gathering darkness and the blessings to be found in the many stories and symbols of this time of year. We light the first candle of Advent for hope. May it shine for all who need inspiration in the midst of challenge and struggle. Our Advent hymn this year is from our Teal hymnal, number 1046, Shall We Gather at the River? Please join in singing the first verse for the first Sunday of Advent.
Shall we gather at the river where bright angel feet have trod, with its crystal tide forever flowing by the throne of God? Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God.
Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by honoring our joys and sorrows. If you would like to share a joy or sorrow with the congregation this morning, now is the time for sharing in the chat box. These won't be shared out loud. If you would like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow, please email me. I'll put my email address in the chat box.
this joy, all this joy, all this sorrow, all this promise, all this pain, such is life, such is peace, such is spirit, such is love, all this joy, all this sorrow, all this promise, all this pain, such is love, such is peace, such is spirit, such is love, all this joy, all this sorrow, all this promise, all this pain, such is life, such is peace, such is spirit, such is love, all this joy, all this sorrow, all this promise, all this pain, such is life, such is peace, such is spirit, such is love.
Our story is called The Keeping Quilt, written and illustrated by Patricia Polacco. When my great-grandma Anna came to America, she wore the same thick overcoat and big boots she had worn for farm work. But her family weren't dirt farmers anymore. In New York City, her father's work was hauling things on a wagon, and the rest of the family made artificial flowers all day. Everyone was in a hurry, and it was so crowded, not like back home Russia. But all the same, it was their home, and most of their neighbors were just like them. When Anna went to school, English sounded to her like pebbles dropping into shallow water. Shh, shh, shh. In 6 months, she was speaking English. Her parents almost never learned, so she spoke English for them, too. The only things she had left of back home Russia were her dress and babushka she liked to throw up into the air when she was dancing. And her dress was getting too small. After her mother had sewn her a new one, she took her old dress and babushka. Then from a basket of old clothes, she took Uncle Vladimir's shirt, Aunt Havala's nightdress, and an apron of Aunt Natasha's. "We will make a quilt to help us always remember home," Anna's mother said. "It will be like having the family in back home Russia dance around us at night." And so it was. Anna's mother invited all the neighborhood ladies. They cut out animals and flowers from the scraps of clothing. Anna kept the needles threaded and handed them to the ladies as they needed them. The border of the quilt was made of Anna's babushka. On Friday nights, Anna's mother would say the prayers that started the Sabbath. The family ate challah and chicken soup. The quilt was the tablecloth. Anna grew up and fell in love with great-grandpa Sasha. To show he wanted to be her husband, he gave Anna a gold coin, a dried flower, and a piece of rock salt, all tied into a linen handkerchief. The gold was for wealth, the flower for love, and the salt so their lives would have flavor. She accepted the hanky, and they were engaged. Under the wedding chuppah, Anna and Sasha promised each other love and understanding. After the wedding, the men and women celebrated separately. When my grandma Carla was born, Anna wrapped her daughter in the quilt to welcome her warmly into the world. Carla was given a gift of gold, flour, salt, and bread. Gold so she would never know poverty, a flour so she would always know love, salt so her life would always have flavor, and bread so that she would never know hunger. Carla learned to keep the Sabbath and to cook and clean and do washing. Married you'll be someday, Anna told Carla, and again, the quilt became a wedding chuppah, this time for Carla's wedding to Grandpa George. Men and women celebrated together, but they still did not dance together. In Carla's wedding bouquet were a gold coin, bread, and salt. Carla and George moved to a farm in Michigan, and Great-Grandma Anna came to live with them. The quilt once again wrapped a new little girl, Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen called Anna Lady Grandma. She had grown very old and was sick a lot of the time. The quilt kept her legs warm. On Anna's 98th birthday, the cake was a kulik, a rich cake with raisins and candied fruit in it. When Great-Grandma Anna died, prayers were said to lift her soul to heaven. My mother, Mary Ellen, was now grown up. When Mary Ellen left home, she took the quilt with her. When she became a bride, the quilt became her chuppah. For the first time, friends who were not Jews came to the wedding. My mother wore a suit, but in her bouquet were gold, bread, and salt. The quilt welcomed me, Patricia, into the world. And it was the tablecloth for my first birthday party. At night, I would trace my fingers around the edges of each animal on the quilt before I went to sleep. I told my mother stories about the animals on the quilt. She told me whose sleeve had made the horse, whose apron had made the chicken, whose dress had made the flowers, and whose babushka went around the edge of the quilt. The quilt was a pretend cape when I was in the bull ring, or sometimes a tent in the steaming Amazon jungle. At my wedding, men and women danced together. In my bouquet were gold, bread, and salt, and a sprinkle of wine, so I would always know laughter. 20 years ago, I held Tracy Denise in the quilt for the first time. Someday she, too, will leave home, and she will take the quilt with her. We've been trained to think of the past in terms of a written historical record. But events don't just get written down, they get recorded and passed on in human bodies. Let's look at these events from the viewpoint of the body through a somatic, body-centered timeline. The past 1,500 plus years in North America can be broken into 5 somatic areas. The Middle or Dark Ages, roughly 500 through 1500. For many generations prior to colonists' arrival in the New World, powerful English people routinely inflicted terrible punishments on other English bodies. Similar atrocities occurred in other countries in Europe. It was standard operating procedure for centuries. The Native American decimation and European colony era, roughly 1500 through 1610. European explorers made initial contact with Native Americans. Soon afterward, immigrants from England, Holland, Spain, Portugal, and France followed to establish colonies. Relations between some colonists and some Native American tribes were cordial. Between others, they were tense or deadly. However, the main threat to Native people came from European diseases, against which Native Americans had little or no resistance. Illness swept through Native settlements in much the same way that plagues had swept through Europe. In 1618 to 1619, for example, smallpox killed 90% of the Native Americans living on or near Massachusetts Bay. The enslavement era, 1619 through 1865. The English became the dominant colonizers of the New World. English colonists forcibly imported Africans to North America and asserted dominion over them. Colonists created whiteness, which enabled them to soothe the dissonance among white bodies, to delegitimize, dehumanize, and totemize Black ones, to create a culture of white body supremacy, and to build institutions, processes, and relationships that maintained this culture. The white body became the standardized, normal body. Other bodies, especially Black bodies, were defined as aberrant or substandard. The Jim Crow era, 1877 through 1965. When the 13th Amendment was ratified and enslavement became illegal in 1865, there was a brief period in which some racial barriers fell and white bodies began to struggle with accepting Black bodies as normal and human. This trend reversed sharply in the South in 1877 when the first Jim Crow laws were enacted. These laws created and enforced the segregation of Black and white bodies, thus renewing and legitimizing the war on Black bodies. The laws also bolstered white body supremacy through a variety of old and new institutions, most notably the lynching of nearly 3,500 Black bodies. Other less violent practices also directly affected Black bodies. For example, Black people were not allowed to kiss or show affection in public, and Black men were not permitted to offer to shake the hand of any white person. The Neo-Crow era, 1966 through the present. In 1965, segregation became illegal throughout the United States, and for the next 2 decades, the civil rights movement lessened some of the overt dissonance between white and Black bodies. It did not, however, soothe the centuries-old dissonance that still existed between poor white bodies and powerful white ones. In the early 1980s, another reversal started. As part of a major escalation of the war on drugs, Black bodies began to be arrested, tried, and jailed in unprecedented numbers, even though Black people used illegal drugs at rates similar to white people. The US prison population exploded from 300,000 to over 2 million, mostly through drug convictions. Today, almost 40% of people incarcerated for drug law violations are Black, even though Black Americans make up about 13% of the country's population. Each church year, I pick a topic for a 10-part sermon series for us to study deeply together. And we call this our spirit study topic for the year. This year, we're working with the book that I just read from, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, written by trauma specialist Resmaa Menakem. And this is the 3rd sermon in this series. One of Menakem's central points is that in the United States, we all have racialized trauma to process, especially white people and Black people, through our everyday existence as people in the United States, and through the physical impacts of trauma that get passed down through generations. So you heard just now Menakem's description of 1,500 years of history described as a history of bodies, white bodies and black bodies, enslaved bodies, dominating bodies. It is a very different way of thinking about history than most of us are used to. One of Menakem's points is that when a white body and a black body encounter each other, there is a history there, a history that goes back centuries. I imagine that for most of us, this idea that trauma passes from generation to generation is fairly new, and that it passes from generation to generation whether we are fully aware of the history or not. This piece may feel especially challenging to understand. After all, if we don't learn about the history of enslavement, racism, and white supremacy in our culture, wouldn't that free us of those teachings? Wouldn't we be liberated? Would ignorance be liberating? To put it a different way, is learning more about the history of white supremacy in our culture good for us, or is it harmful? Remember the bromide. Those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. More importantly for us as Unitarian Universalists is the reminder of 2 of the 7 principles we are covenanted to affirm and promote. First, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We value truth in and of itself. Second, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We cannot promote justice, equity, and compassion while remaining ignorant of history, of reality, of facts, information. I would especially argue that in these particular times, we are called to stand up for the importance of truth, reality, facts, and information. And we can't do that if we're hiding from those things. Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, was published 10 years ago. I think it's very concretely a book that has changed the world, at least in the United States, making the connections between the history of overt racial discrimination and segregation and the modern day legal and judicial system that effectively segregates Black people, especially males. The new Jim Crow helped pave the way for the Black Lives Matter movement. Remember that the affirmation that Black Lives Matter started after the death of Trayvon Martin, the 17-year-old who was shot and killed because the very fact of his being Black was terrifying to his murderer. Over and over, we have seen Black people killed because their Black bodies are experienced as terrifying. As Resmaa Menakem tells us, white body supremacy teaches us that the Black body is dangerous and threatening. The Black body is impervious to pain. The Black body is incredibly strong and resilient, almost invulnerable. That the Black body is hypersexual. That the Black body is dirty. The Black body is unattractive, especially in comparison with the white body. Therefore, the Black body needs to be managed and controlled by any means necessary. So I want to stop for a moment. That was a terrible litany of racist lies. So let's take a breath together. Check in with your own body. What are you feeling in response to hearing that? I'm tearful. I feel like my heart is beating a little faster than usual. Feeling a little unsettled, jittery, like I want to run away from it. It's important when we're experiencing anything, but things that are potentially traumatizing, to check in with our bodies and to learn to listen to our bodies. That will be one of Menakem's points as we go along. We're taught to ignore our trauma instead of responding to it. So Menakem goes on after that list. Except among members of white supremacist groups, such as the KKK and the Aryan nations, these concepts are not attitudes, cognitive beliefs, ideas, or philosophies. They are far simpler and more primitive. They are nonverbal sensations felt by white bodies along with fear, hate, and constriction. Or to put it another way, still quoting Menakem, they are nonverbal stories white bodies tell each other. Even to call them concepts isn't accurate. Sensations or impressions come closer. These sensations or impressions are demonstrably untrue, irrational, and in some cases, literally impossible. But bodies, white, black, and otherwise, don't care about what's rational, possible, or true. They just want to experience safety. And they don't distinguish between genuine threats, possible threats, and imaginary threats. They have been conditioned to fight or flee. It's the end of that section of quoting him. So this is why we hear so often that people, even trained police officers, feel threatened by a Black person who is walking, jogging, sleeping, studying, sitting on a plane, mowing the lawn, walking their dog, shopping, and sadly, 100 more ordinary activities I could name that Black people have been doing when they have been attacked as being threatening. So again, these sensations or impressions are demonstrably untrue, irrational, and in some cases, literally impossible. But bodies, white, black, and otherwise, don't care about what's rational, possible, or true. Think about this in the context of some of the things we're witnessing in our country right now. Bodies don't care about what's rational, possible, or true. They just want to experience safety. And they don't distinguish between genuine threats, possible threats, and imaginary threats. They have been conditioned to fight or flee. So if we are to promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, then we must continue to learn about and to face the history of white body supremacy in our country. We cannot heal trauma that has not been what Menakem calls metabolized. We have to process our pain, our history, in order to heal it. It won't just go away on its own. We've certainly learned that. When a body has healed its trauma, it becomes what Menakem calls a settled body. Settled. And a body with unhealed trauma, unmetabolized trauma, is called an unsettled body. So this is language for things we already know and have observed, but didn't maybe have a good name for. We all know people who seem settled. The word I would use is grounded. And we all know people who seem unsettled, who have unprocessed, unhealed wounds that they're ignoring. Menakem tells us, when one settled body encounters another, this can create a deeper settling of both bodies. But when one unsettled body encounters another, the unsettledness tends to compound in both bodies. In large groups, this compounding effect can turn a peaceful crowd into an angry mob. Again, think of some of the things we've seen. Unsettled body encounters another, the unsettledness tends to compound in both bodies. So I'm so grateful for these concepts because I feel like they're especially helpful in this historical moment when we're trying to make sense of what's happening, what's been happening in our culture. And I'm deeply comforted by the idea that bodies impact each other and that can happen in a positive way, that the presence of settled bodies may have something good to offer unsettled bodies, that the more and more of us who can metabolize our pain, who can heal our wounds, have the potential to have a broader impact beyond just individual well-being. So no matter how mixed up the world can seem sometimes, I believe that we all have a deep yearning for healing and wholeness, no matter how far away from that path some people seem to be wandering. Let's help ground ourselves now by singing.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the kinship we all share, for all gentle thoughts and mild, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. Lao Tzu teaches in the Tao Te Ching, the master has no possessions. The more he does for others, the happier he is. The more she gives to others, the wealthier she is. You're invited to text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't done this before, know that once you enter the dollar amount and send it, you'll get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. And once you've done that one time, you don't need to do it again for future donations. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate the word pledge after the dollar amount. And also remember that you can make a text donation anytime. It doesn't need to be during worship. The phone number will be on the screen in just a moment. Please give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. Open hearts, open minds, open doors, nurturing spirits, seeking justice within the wider world. This is our mission.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet, sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the rain, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on and hope in your heart, and you'll never, no, you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk. You'll never walk. You'll never walk. You'll never walk
It's the holiday season now, shaping up to be, I think, one of the most stressful times of the pandemic for many of us. Coronavirus cases are increasing dramatically, even here in San Diego, where we felt, I think, mostly like it was under control most of this time. but cases here have quadrupled in the past month. We will be confronted over and over again with all the ways this December will not be like any December in our lifetimes. We know vaccines are coming, but the distribution can't come fast enough. We joked in April that we had taken giving things up for Lent to new extremes. This year's Advent will be a time of waiting with hopeful expectation like never before. Things are hard. And even if we do all the things I've ever suggested or that you know are good for you, there is no way to make things seem normal or okay. Next week's service is called Blue Christmas, and we'll be talking about all the emotions. Whatever you are feeling, fear, anger, hope, sadness, and more, that is the right thing to feel. And remember, be gentle with yourselves and each other. Please join in singing.
Though days be dark with storms and burdens weigh my heart, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on when sorrow heals my soul and burdens make me strong. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on, my sister in my heart, my brother in my soul. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on, and though the journey is long, the destination is near. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. So, brothers, take my hand, and sisters, sing my song. When hope awaits at every turn, I know we will go on.
May you go forward knowing that life is fragile and a gift, that you are lovable and loved, and you are not alone. Love and blessings to each of you. Blessed be. You're invited to close our time together by singing The Well. Newcomers are invited to stay here for a newcomer chat, and everyone is invited to coffee hour.